Hello everyone, I'm back here with another topic of neurology. Now, this is a while I have made certain video because I was busy in the super specialty counseling, and so today I will be talking about myasthenia gravis. Now, we all are aware of myasthenia gravis, how it works, and what all topics you need to know, and how what are the symptoms, and how the patient presents to you. But do you really know how is the sequence? What should be the treatment protocol? What is the emergency? What is it called? What is the crisis part? And anything and everything that a myasthenia patient should deserve from a treatment perspective, I shall be telling you in this video. So let's start with the introduction part. Now, this is something which is related to a neuromuscular junction. When it comes to a pure motor syndrome, you should be thinking of a motor neuron disease, motor nerve disease, neuromuscular junction, and muscle. So these are the four junctions where your idea should be for a motor syndrome. Okay, so if it is a pure motor syndrome, right? So now, if you think about patients who are coming with myasthenia gravis, so what should be the age and how should be the patient and everything like that. So we are all aware that it is kind of an autoimmune disease. Okay, we have this idea. Okay, so now if it is an autoimmune disease, it should be more common in females. But yeah, we have seen male patient presenting to us with this. Okay, now when it comes to clinical features, we have whole lot of symptoms including diplopia, which is very basic and which every person is now aware. Okay, medico is aware that the patient will be coming with a weakness, will be coming with a diplopia, but other than that there are other things. Okay, so weakness could be in a motor neuron disease, it could be in a muscle disease, myopathy. So how could you just justify this as a myasthenia gravis patient and diplopia and internuclear ophthalmoplegia? We call it as a pseudo internuclear ophthalmoplegia, which you will be learning in this video. And if you have already learned, you would be brushing up on that. So this can be seen in case of a few diseases as well. So how do you differentiate it? Okay, how is it different? So coming to a clinical feature, fatigable weakness, that is objective. The patient will be saying that after doing certain home chores or doing certain errands, he would be saying, or he or she would be saying that there would be a weakness, and that is actually increasing weakness. So fatigable weakness. Okay, that is the one thing. The another thing is there would be fluctuation, diurnal variation, and exertional induced weakness. Okay, so what we have talked about. And another thing is ocular involvement, that is a diplopia. We have already said that. Pharyngeal involvement, dysphagia is one of the things. So one when the patient comes to you with that of a pharyngeal involvement, another differential, including that of a snake bite, should be this. That is the myasthenia gravis. Now, of course, snake bite has a particular thing that it should be having a bite mark. It should be having certain acute onset. Unlike that, myasthenia gravis patient have diplopia almost like 3 years. For almost 3 years, the patient has diplopia. And then the patient can present with that of a generalized weakness. Okay, so these are certain here in the topics. Now how would you differentiate is by studying these topics. Now it is very important for you to know all the points regarding myasthenia, regarding myopathy, regarding snake bite, regarding botulism, regarding Lambert-Eaton as well. Okay, so yes, so now coming to that of a pathophysiology, what happens is whenever a current is passing, okay, so that is a current that is telling us that a work has to be done, right? Whenever the work has to be done, there is a current that is passing, and that is causing the entry of a calcium channel in calciums into that of the cell through a calcium channel, and that will lead to a release of neurotransmitter, mostly acetylcholine in our case. Then the acetylcholine will act on the acetylcholine receptor which are present in the postsynaptic. This was what I was talking about presynaptic, then it is a postsynaptic. So this is how we have the system. We have the work that is going on. And this release of sodium will create a postsynaptic, enters the postsynaptic membrane. So this is having a end potential that is being created. Okay. So when it comes to calcium channels being defective for some or the other reasons, including antibodies to them, that is a Lambert-Eaton syndrome. And mostly it is related to small cell carcinoma of the lung. When it comes to myasthenia gravis, it is the acetylcholine receptor which are getting destroyed because of the antibodies that are formed against it. Okay. Now, in the brain, we have a blood nerve barrier, right? But here we don't have any blood nerve barrier. So that's why any antibodies, any toxins, they just easily flow, right? And what antibodies we are talking about? We have the acetylcholine receptor antibodies or the calcium. So calcium channel against the calcium channel. So myasthenia is one of the thing, and Lambert-Eaton syndrome is another thing. Then the toxins, we have botulism, and that is the botulism. We have a presynaptically acting toxin. When it comes to bungarotoxin, which is alpha, beta, gamma, kappa, alpha and kappa, these are the postsynaptic, beta and gamma presynaptic. This is very important. These points have been asked in the MCQ. Okay. Another thing is neuromuscular junction disorder. We have two things we have already discussed about it. Okay, so now there is a one important pathophysiology which I came across in a Harrison. That is a presynaptic rundown. Now, what is it? So, amount of the acetylcholine which is released per impulse normally declines on repeated activity. So, it in a normal individual, fatigue is there, right? In a physiology, we have done one of the practicals like we have one of the persons was volunteer, one of our colleague, and he was doing repeated activity through with his hands, with the fingers, if you remember, and this created fatigueness to him. And when we used to cheer our colleague, he could do some more activity through his finger, but at certain point he was not able to do. That is mostly a normal phenomenon. But in myasthenia, due to the antibodies to that of the acetylcholine, and acetylcholine already is low, so there will be accelerated turnover of acetylcholine receptor. Another thing is there is a damage to the postsynaptic membrane because of the antibodies. And of course, there will be a blockade of the active site of acetylcholine receptor. I hope I am very much clear what is myasthenia now. Okay, so there are certain antibodies, very, very important slide. Acetylcholine receptor antibody, 80 to 85% of the myasthenia gravis we will be expecting in such patients. Anti-MuSK antibody, that is actually seen in only few patients. Okay, most of the patients can have acetylcholine receptor antibody, but a few of them do not have any antibody, so they are said as double seronegative, and we check for LRP4 antibody. Okay. So even these three are negative sometimes. Okay, and we have to check another like actin, rhinodin. Okay, these are the certain antibodies which are having a very bad prognosis. We have to check them. So it is an IgG1 and IgG3 acetylcholine receptor antibody, and they activate the complement. This is very important. Okay, so now what happens is, suppose in the early case, pyridostigmine is one of the treatment option. Okay, we have learned this in pharmacology as well. But do you know that if in case symptomatically we are giving to a patient who is coming in a crisis and everything, and we are giving pyridostigmine, so what happens is it will decrease the acetylcholine esterase, which is the enzyme which is cutting down the acetylcholine, which is breaking down the acetylcholine. We do not want that. So what happens? Patient improves, but as the disease progresses, the damage occurs, and there is an endocytosis and destruction that is occurring. And what will do that? What will happen? There will be increase in the weakness and wasting, and that's why plasma exchange or IVIG is a better option for short-term therapy only. Okay, so that will be a treatment option. So that will be we will be discussing in a few moments. Okay, so remember, pyridostigmine long-term not advisable. Another thing is anti-MuSK antibody. For the anti-MuSK antibody, it is an IgG4, and mostly there will be a facial weakness or facial fasciculations. Everything is expected in such patients. Wasting or atrophy is common, but there is no complement activation as such. It worsens with the pyridostigmine, right? And that is something which is a anti-MuSK antibody. When it comes to LRP4 antibody, it is IgG1 and IgG2, and it also activates the complement. So the only one which is not activating the complement is the anti-MuSK antibody. Now, thymus. Now we know that antibodies are formed from the thymus, B and T cells, right? So thymoma or the neoplasm will play a role, right? Most of the patients, they can have a thymoma or any neoplasm. So 70% they can have a hyperplastic thymus, and the other 10% they can have a neoplasm. In myasthenia gravis, mostly they have this. That's why CT becomes very important to know what is the cause. So hyperplastic thymus, if it is there, how does it act? How does it contribute for the myasthenia? It is the myode-like cell which contains the acetylcholine receptor epitopes. Now these epitopes are nothing but antigen, so antibodies will be formed against it, right? So act as an antigen to produce the antibodies. So thymoma and neoplasm, how does it contribute for the myasthenia? It is because of the air. Now this is the term which I heard very it was a new term for me, because I read that in Harrison. So it is an autoimmune regulatory protein gene that is actually very you know we have a APS syndrome. So one of the thing is AR gene is also involved in APS syndrome. So mostly it is an autoimmune thing, which is the antibodies should be down regulated because of AR gene. But in AR gene only, if it is a down regulated, then no antibodies can be nullified, right? So that's why gene is responsible for the suppression of autoimmunity. So large amount of antibodies will be formed because of the AR gene being down regulated. Okay, another titin and rhinodin these are having bad prognosis. Now there are certain stages of myasthenia gravis. Now if you see, there is an active phase, okay, and there is a inactive phase, and then there is a burnout phase. Okay, so now coming to that of the active phase, there is a fluctuating type of a weakness, okay, and there will be a severe weakness. We give a treatment, patient will be in remission. Again, patient can go into relapse. This is an active phase. When talk about the inactive phase, there will be fluctuations, but there is no persistent weakness. And then there is a burnout phase, there is a fixed weakness plus the atrophy of the weak muscle. Now, frankly speaking, we cannot divide patient in active phase, inactive phase, or burnout phase, because weakness is there. Fluctuations can be happening in active as well as inactive. So we cannot differentiate the patient. It is just a theoretical aspect. Okay. So we have ocular symptoms, which can be even isolated even for 3 years. And there will be a progression from ocular to the trunk, that is the generalized form of the myasthenia gravis. Diplopia and ptosis could also be present. Link weakness could be there. Oropharyngeal symptoms could be there. When it comes to ocular features, first is the asymmetrical ptosis. Okay. Another thing is the peak sign. On tight closure of the eyes, there will be no burring of the eyelashes. Cogan-Leibowitz sign. This is very well known. After a sustained downward look, when a patient is asked to look forward, the eyes overshoot and come back. Curtain sign. Whenever there is a unilateral ptosis, if the ptosis eyelid forced to open, a normal eye closes more. Okay. The medial rectus is the muscle which is more commonly affected, and there will be multiple nerve involvement as well. And there would be a pseudo-INO, that is internuclear ophthalmoplegia. If we talk about the oropharyngeal, there will be dysphagia, there will be a dysarthria, okay, there would be difficulty in swallowing, right, and myasthenia snare actually is there. You can see the picture. Patient is smiling, but it doesn't seem like that, right? There will be chewing difficulty as well. In the limb weakness, there is actually a neck flexors which are affected more commonly. The triceps and the biceps, deltoid, and the extension of the wrist or the fingers could be also affected. Dorsiflexion of the ankle and the hip flexors are also affected. Okay, so remember this, because uh, when it comes as an MCQ, these things would be very important for you, because the MCQs are made upon how the Harrison or the major textbooks what they say, and if they are saying these particular things, that would be depicted in the question paper. So that's why it is very important for you to know what the textbooks, okay, standard textbooks say. Okay, so dorsiflexion of the ankle, and there could be also hip flexors which are affected. Another thing is the neck flexors, and another thing is the deltoid triceps, okay, and extension of the fingers. Okay, so when it comes to the antibodies, so ocular acetylcholine receptor antibody, generalized, if it is an early onset, less than 50 years, females are more commonly affected. And if it is actually say late onset, that is more than 50 years, males are affected. So thymic hyperplasia is expected in females, and they have acetylcholine receptor antibody as well. But it comes to the males they have anti-titin and anti-rhinotide antibody, which has a bad prognosis. When it comes to thymomatous myasthenia gravis, which is more commonly more than 40 years of the age group, they have the anti-titin and rhinodin, which has bad prognosis. Anti-MuSK antibody, this could be the thymus could be normal in such patients. LRP4, thymus can be unknown, is not known, okay. And there is a thing which is called as seronegative, that is all the antibodies are not present, that is anti-titer, acetylcholine receptor titer is very low. Protactin and agrin could be possible in such patients. Now, factors which are worsening myasthenia. So, whenever you are giving an antibiotic, patient also deteriorates. Now, this is the fact with the aminoglycosides. Okay, with the fluoroquinone, macrolides, magnesium. Then, if we are giving a Botox, then any of the procainamide, beta blockers, hydroxychloroquine, quinine, chloroquine. Okay, so these should be avoided. Patient can go into a crisis if he is stressful, having infections, having systemic illnesses, menstruating, pregnant, hypo or hyperthyroidism patients. So how do we diagnose a patient? One is the ISPAC test, another thing is the hydrophonium test, and we have single fiber EMG, which is actually the best test. Okay. So coming to best bedside test is the ISPAC test. So we give the ISPAC on the torsus eye. After 2 minutes, we see if there is a decrease in the torsus by 2 mm. That is actually, we will be saying it is a equivocal. Okay. Another thing is hydrophonium test. So we give 2 milligram, 3 milligram after 60 seconds, 4 milligram after 60 seconds. So we see for the response. Okay. So if we talk about the false positive test for the hydrophonium, so there are certain aspects like congenital myasthenic syndrome, Lambert-Eaton syndrome, intracranial aneurysms, brainstem lesions, cavernous sinus tumors, end-stage renal disease, and any of the muscle diseases. Now, this is very important in INI people who are undergoing INI. Okay, so these questions are asked in INI, and the antibody assay, I will go for acetylcholine receptor antibody. Now, say if a patient comes to me, he is full-blown myasthenic. I am quite sure about that, but I have to justify myself. I will go with the antibodies, but the antibodies are negative. So do I label him as he is not myasthenic? No. So we have to wait for 6 to 12 months, and then we have to again repeat for the antibodies. And if the antibodies are negative, then we can say the patient is negative, and most of the time it is positive only after 6 to 12 months. Okay. So we have to see for the titer also, if the patient has been given any treatment and the titers are decreasing. So yes, the treatment is working. If not, we have to change for the treatment. False positive acetylcholine receptor antibodies are also present. So thymoma without any myasthenia, myasthenic gravis, they can have this positivity. Then another is the first degree relative. Okay, SLE patient, any inflammatory neuropathies, autoimmune diseases, ALS, or any autoimmune liver disease. So they can have false positive acetylcholine receptor. Okay, this is also a INI question only. So anti-MuSK antibody, that is actually IgG4, and it does not activate the complement. This is very important. LRP4, which is activating the complement, IgG1 and IgG2. Double positive, LRP4 with the MuSK or acetylcholine receptor. Anti-striatal antibody is the titin rhinodin actin, and it is called as the severe disease if it is the anti-striatal with that of any of these three. Okay. So best side test for ocular myasthenia gravis is the ISPAC test. Okay, so that is very important. Then best electrodiagnostic test is the single fiber EMG. Okay, best test for oropharyngeal is the respiratory nerve stimulation test. And other tests which is important are the thyroid function test, then CT of the chest. Then for the immunosuppression, therapy. We have to check for TB, hepatitis C. Okay, we have to check for that, and accordingly we have to treat the patient. Okay, so another thing is in the musk, if the musk antibodies are present, these normal therapies that whatever we are going to see now, these do not work in musk antibody patient. So what do? We have to give them eculizumab, okay, which is a C5 antibody. And in case of a repetitive nerve stimulation test, there should be a decremental response more than 10% is a highly probable. We say it is a highly probable disease. Now coming to the treatment of asthenia gravis. So for the symptomatic, we have pyridostigmine 30 to 60 milligram, TDS mostly given, and we have already known how does it work. It is the acetylcholinesterase which is being destroyed by pyridostigmine so that acetylcholine remain. The short-term treatment, this is very important for all of us. Plasma exchange or IVIG is very important. So plasma exchange, we give 2 to 3 liters of the plasma. Has been removed in 5 to 6 settings. And for the replacement, we have the plasma, which is important, FFP. Another thing is newly we have these techniques, that is immunoadsorption column. Now, there should be a passage of blood in this, which absorbs the antibodies, not the blood. So there is no need for any replacement therapy. Okay. Another thing is IVIG. So IVIG is given as a 2 gram per kg over 5 days. Okay. So side effects of IVIG: thrombosis, renal failure, headache, chills, myalgia. Okay. So in the MUSK myasthenia gravis, eculizumab is given, which has the improvement within 1 to 3 months. What are the treatment? What are the indications for the short-term treatment? Why should one patient go for short-term? So if the patient has a corticosteroid-induced exacerbation, if the patient has a myasthenic crisis, okay, severe myasthenia gravis, chronically ill refractory patient, then we should go for short-term. Coming to long-term treatment, so steroids play a role in a long term. So remember, if a patient coming to you in a crisis, you cannot rely on steroids because steroids can exacerbate the symptoms. So steroids 10 to 50 milligram, 10 to 20 milligram per day, and we can increase, or we can go with the pulse and with that of the plasma exchange or IVIG. Azathioprine, MMF, cyclosporin, tacrolimus, cyclophosphamide, rituximab, or all can be given as a long-term treatment. Remember that. This is important. In fact, thymectomy should also be performed. If the patient has thymomatous, 100% we have to go. If it is a non-thymomatous, early thymectomy could be done if the patient is less than 50 years of the age. And if it is a refractory, severe case, treatment failure, we can perform thymectomy in such patient. Okay. So mostly it is a physician call. What do we have to do? Okay. The first line is the pyridostigmine. Second line is the prednisolone. Third line, non-steroidal. Very, very rarely we can give. And thymectomy. So the first line is the pyridostigmine. Okay. As a symptomatic. So another thing is vaccination. This is very, outlooked. It has been outlooked, this topic. In COPD, in CKD, this vaccination has to be introduced in our daily lives. I know it is pretty, costly for our country, like India, to have this vaccination and everything. But please give an option to such patients because they can be affording, okay, and you need to give certain vaccination protocol to them. Certain vaccinations are available in government setup, certain are available in private setup. Okay, so vaccines as pneumococcus, shingles, COVID, you can just give them, right? Okay, so I hope you have all enjoyed this video. Okay, so there are few topics here and there that I have included, and I have read from Harrison as well. And this is a bit of complicated topic. It is the neurologist call. It is the physician's call. Everyone treats a patient differently. So if the patient is a myasthenic crisis, so first thing is the intubation. Okay, plasmapheresis IVIG without steroids is the option, and we need to stop pyridostigmine because it will worsen the condition as well. What do you do in a pregnant female. First thing is the pyridostigmine. Short-term therapy like plasma-exchange IVIG is safe. Long-term steroids have to be given. Now, you have already learned that one of the things is the magnesium, which has the worsening factors. So, magnesium to be avoided, and barbiturates can be given as in case of eclampsia. Okay. First stage of labor is fine. Not much of the pelvic muscles are involved. But in second stage of labor, the pelvic and abdominal muscles are needed. So, vacuum or assisted delivery should be performed in such patients. Lambert-Eaton myasthenia gravis, small cell carcinoma of the lung, mostly, okay. The antibodies are against the calcium channel presynaptically. So there would be motor involvement, sensory involvement, autonomic involvement as well. Ptosis and diplopia is also there. Okay. So I don't think this is our main topic. So we just have to brush on Lambert-Eaton myasthenia syndrome. Okay. So this was all for today. And thank you so much for watching. Please keep studying and motivate others also.